Hi, welcome to DrumWise Meets. Today I'm here with a drummer who's the current drummer for Billie Eilish and Finneas. I'm here with Andrew Marshall. Hi Andrew.
Hey man, good to see you. Thanks for having me.
What age did you get into drums? And when you first started playing, what bands or artists inspired you?
I started playing when I was 9, and that was really just like on a whim, honestly. I had actually lost the lottery to get into the school band on drums. Like they had this lottery where like everyone drew straws or whatever, because there could only really be like 5 or 6 drummers. And I lost, and I ended up playing saxophone for a year. And I just like for some reason like had the bug. Like I thought drums looked really cool, and like I had a friend who played drums or something I really wanted to play. So that year I like my asked my parents to get me a drum set, and they got me some lessons. And then the next year I joined the school band on drums, and the rest is history, I guess. But yeah, so I was 9. And in the beginning, actually, weirdly enough, I was really into drummers. Like some kids, like they're really into bands, and like later I got into some bands, and there are bands that I love, but like I wasn't like I was just all about like who played on this record, that record, or like I would go online and watch drummer videos. Like I was just obsessed with the drums. So that was kind of like from age like 9 to 12 or 13, my influences were like Buddy Rich, Steve Gadd, Dave Weckl, and like whatever project they were playing in. So yeah, sort of like mostly like in a jazz fusion type world. Um but yeah, I mean, at that age, it was really Buddy Rich was like, I was just obsessed for years with him.
That's a pretty good person to be obsessed with at that sort of young age, definitely.
It was
Yeah.
really weird. I don't know how that happened, but most kids would be like, oh, whatever. I was watching these videos like from the 60s, but yeah, Chops Meisters, Buddy and Steve and Dave Weckl. That was it.
Cool.
Yeah.
And when you first started, what was your first drum set?
It was a Groove Percussion 22, 12, 13, 16 in Burgundy. We just got it at Sam Ash, kind of a classic beginner kit. But yeah, I mean, it was what was nice about that was that it was like a full size kit, and actually kind of bigger than anything I play now. Rather than like getting a kid sized kit where I with paper heads where I would just like bash through them immediately. Kind of it was like the real thing, and I had that until I think a couple of years ago we gave it to a school or something.
Mm. Oh, cool. And that was going to be my next question. Do you still have it? So that's nice that it still lives on somewhere at a school.
Yeah, I like some people are like, oh, I really wish I still had my first kit, which I could understand if your first kit was like like an old Ludwig or like Gretsch or Slingerland or something you bought in the 60s or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, and that was a great kit to get started. I mean, it was awesome, but like I'm very like minimal in my approach to like gear. Like it's really just one in, one out. And
Mm.
even now I feel like I have too many kits and too many snares, and it's like pretty minimal. So
Mm.
yeah, I've thought better to give it to someone who's gonna get some mileage out of it.
Mm. Yeah, that's nice. Yeah, I know what you mean because my first kit, you probably didn't have it in the States, but it was a Session Pro. So it was just like a really budget, basic kit with the cymbals you could turn inside out. And
Yeah.
yeah, there's absolutely no way I would use it now. But yeah, what you're saying about some people I've interviewed have been like, yeah, I had a 60s Ludwig or a 60s Gretsch, but nah, I haven't got it anymore. Got rid of it. Just like, that would be worth so much money now.
Yeah, that would be heartbreaking for sure, but I didn't go through that, luckily.
And while we're talking about equipment, and you've said obviously about the minimalist approach and not having too much gear, what equipment do you currently use? So what's your normal setup when you're out gigging?
Well, I play Gretsch drums, and I love them. I've had several of their kits and backlined a bunch of them. These are my broadcasters behind me in the studio. That's like my main studio kit. That's 2012, 16. Um, on tour with Billy, I have sort of a actually interesting Frankenstein kit where we have Gretsch Brooklyn toms and USA custom kicks and snares. or kick and snares, I guess. Um, and that's just because we, just love myself and my drum tech and the front of house, everybody, we love the Brooklyn Toms, because we got them on backline ones. Um, so yeah, that's those are sort of the kits: USA, Brooklyn, and Broadcaster.
This next question, some people have found really difficult to answer, and others have just gone straight to their answer. So I don't want to make your life easy. So let's see. Um,
Good.
and I would find this hard to answer myself. But if you had to pick just one drummer, who would be your all-time favorite?
That is sort of a tough question because I feel like there are several people that, I mean, I could say, but just based on my life, it would probably have to be Gad. Like, I mean, he's just been such a constant influence forever, and on so many drummers, and I feel like a lot of people would say that, if when asked that question. I wonder how many other of your interviewees have said Steve Gadd, but um yeah, I mean, I've seen him play multiple times with multiple artists. I even got to meet him a couple times, which is awesome. And yeah, I mean, there's nothing that I could say that would further like explain like how incredible Steve Gadd is, but if you know, I guess.
Yeah, and you're right. He is probably the name that's come up the most in the answer to this question, or at least certainly one of the top three names. Then, if I opened the door a bit and said, "Okay, give us a few other influences of yours," who would they be? Obviously, I know you've mentioned a few previously, but who are your other biggest influences if you had to draw from everybody over the years?
Yeah, sure. Aaron Sterling is a big one now. And he's, very famous in the drum community and a very inspiring player. Steve Jordan, Brendan Buckley also is a huge influence. Someone who I know now, and just an incredible player, and really inspiring in terms of like all the pop stuff, and playing for the song and electronics and all that. Really big influence on me. Um, I mean, Jeff Porcaro, huge, and um, Kurt Biscara, all those sort of players. I kind of, um, I've just always loved the players that were working, that were playing on records, and being called to tour with like artist after artist, and who else? I mean, Jason Sutter is like another one like that. Keith Carlock, I mean, that's sort of like always the drummer that I wanted to be, is like someone who, maybe they're not a household name like a Travis Barker or a Dave Grohl or something, but and a lot of these people are household names in the music community, obviously, but um, that their resume just spoke for themselves, and I was really always inspired by that, like that, a year for them would be like a bunch of different artists and a bunch of different records. I always thought that was really cool.
Now, possibly another difficult question for you here, Andrew. If you had to pick just one highlight, what would be the highlight of your career so far?
Wow. Um, I would say probably Coachella, playing Coachella. Um, just because like we've done mostly with Billy, obviously, like we've done things that are quote unquote as big, like um or high profile. But Coachella was a moment for us that I think it represented the biggest like immediate step up in terms of where we were at, like, or where Billy was at as an artist in terms of like how big she was. Because the tour before that, we were in Europe playing like 700 to 1200 capacity venues, which is like nice size, but like clubs. um and then did that European tour, came home straight into like 3 weeks of rehearsals for like new album, new music, new production. First, I like switched my drum set around completely. Like I got a bunch of V drums, um and I think we ordered a new Gretsch kit at that time. I think I had just signed on with Gretsch, and then the first gig was Coachella with the new set, 100, 80, 90,000 people, however much, and then we were straight on to playing amphitheaters. Like, so that was like really like a huge jump within like a month and a half or something. and like there's been growth of that level, but everything else I felt like was a little more gradual. Like like we were playing amphitheaters, and then we like went to like bigger festivals, bigger festival slots, and then like arenas, but that jump was just like sort of we all had whiplash, I think, after that.
And with that, how did you deal with that jump up to not being able to see the back of the audience, the crowd? How did that affect you? Were there nerves? Were the nerves worse when you went on to play, or did you find that it was just you just took it in your stride?
Yeah, that particular gig, I remember being really nervous beforehand. And then once we were on stage, it was like, whew, like it all melted away, and it was like fine, and the crowd was like really energizing. And I thought those shows were really great. We had some technical issues that like delayed the start of the first week, like the first weekend's show, and then the second weekend they had to cut some production elements because of wind and stuff. So but like even with all that, like musically, I thought it was pretty rad.
Mm,
um in general, people who know me know I'm pretty into like yoga and meditation. um and those are like my primary um nerve busters. I'm really into that, and like the whole like self-care vibe. I mean, when I'm on tour, I'm pretty much playing shows and doing self-care, and I think like keeping my body and mind in like tip-top shape is like what helps me just relax. I mean, because it's nuts. I mean, you're looking at like a postcard at like an arena full of people or whatever, and they're like whoever is side stage, like some famous band or something. So that's how I keep my wits about me. And I don't know, I mean, I guess some people are natural at it, but it took work for me to be able to like be comfortable with that.
mm. From kind of career highlights to kind of the opposite. We talked there about technical problems. That's kind of where I'm going with this question.
Yeah.
Have you ever had anything go wrong on stage, whether it be gear fails, stage fails, or brain fails, that you can tell us about that you've had to recover from and obviously try and keep going?
Sure. Many times, tons of things have happened. Um, One that comes to mind is that I think we're in Australia, and we were playing this song "When the Party's Over," which is this like big 6/4 ballad, and the power went out. The whole stage power went out, and they finished singing the song like just a cappella with the crowd. That was like kind of an incredible moment, to be honest. Like that was like, I mean, there have been many moments like this, but um that was one where I was like, wow, Billy and Phineas are just real born artists and real professionals, that they could roll with something like that. It was amazing, and it was like rad to see the whole like this huge sing along. It was sick. Then we had to leave the stage and like wait for the power to come back on. um but yeah, I mean, that was probably one of the more fun ones, like fun mishaps. There have been other mishaps that were like not fun at all, just horrible. One time we were playing a show, and like um in like we were going into the second verse of this song, and like all of a sudden, no tracks, no SPD pads. I look over at the computer, and there's like the red bar that says like no the audio engine is off in Ableton. And we just had to kill the song. Like it was, very electronic heavy, like we couldn't finish. And to make matters worse, I was in session view in Ableton. I don't know how many people know about this, but you can't like start in the middle really. So we just had to like kill the song and move on. It was terrible. And no reason for that. The cable didn't come unplugged. Like nothing happened. It was totally bizarre. So that sucked. um and that's just whatever. I kind of like stopped using Thunderbolt interfaces live after that. I kind of it was a Thunderbolt cable, and I was like, maybe Thunderbolt is not as like stable a connection when it's sitting on top of a subwoofer or something as USB. I don't know. Um that was one time we had like a click was drifting from the track inexplicably. Um I've had like my MIDI pads or my drum pads, which are MIDI, like they drop out from time to time, and we sort of like rectified all those things. But it's definitely never fun. And I think that the only, they say steel is forged in the fire. The only way to like really keep a cool head and deal with that stuff is like to just have done it a lot and be like, okay, like MIDI pads are out. Get on the talkback. Hey guys, can we fix this or like whatever? Can we play an acoustic song while you sort this out? Um, and then yeah, that's all I can do. I feel like there was one I was playing actually with a different artist a couple years back, and we were setting up in a really quick changeover at a small club, Tracks, Ableton, and I was using this USB cable that was clearly bad because my the interface was not the computer was not seeing the interface. And I was like, all right guys, I need a new USB cable. Like we found another one and we swapped it out and it was fine. And like we went on 5 minutes later or something. And afterward the band was like, man, you really like handled that really well. Like we were freaking out. I was like, I didn't even think about it. It's just having dealt with it a lot, you kind of figure it out. But there will always be things. It's,
Mm.
we rely on computers. Computers have glitches. It is what it is.
It is, exactly. And you reminded me of something that happened to me, which I'll tell you about. We were using the SPDSX for backing tracks for this artist I played for a few years ago. And I had uh, one of the top left pad one started the backing track and the click. And I've had it before with an SPDSX. It seems, because the headphone jack is directly underneath it, and it seems after a while it affects the headphone jack. Out of the front of house, it was fine, but coming to me in my mixer, it was just like cutting out, and it was terrible. And if I hit it too hard, I was getting this really horrible noise. So I'd have to like start the click track just by tapping it with my hand rather than hitting it with the stick. But there was lots of starts and stops of track, so I'd have to be playing and then like tap it, and
Oh
yeah,
my
that was
God.
not fun. So technology fails, not good.
That's a nightmare, man. People like don't some people like don't seem to appreciate like especially us as drummers like how much it's usually like a lot of times it falls to the drummer,
Hmm.
to run tracks, and that's how I got into that whole thing. And now I you know do tons of work with Ableton, both when I'm playing and also not playing, like just doing Ableton stuff. And I value all that experience and knowledge I've gained, but it is a funny thing like where we have the most gear to set up and the least amount of room behind our rigs, but yet somehow we're always running tracks. It's like
Yeah.
but I mean, look, like I said, steel is forged in the fire, and
Yeah.
you learn. I mean, I've just learned so much. I've learned it all the hard way. There's no book. Although there's a couple. I feel like a couple of my friends have started making some like instructional videos or something. But
Yeah.
um, yeah, man, I've seen a lot of crazy shit.
And what's specifically with Billie Eilish stuff? What's your job with the electronics in terms of, is it your job to literally load the samples into Ableton or onto the SPDSX? Is that all down to you?
Yeah, so I basically can cover drum world, the drum aspect of MIDI world. So like I I start with the stems, um, like an MD would, and I like build a stem session and I start chopping out my drum samples from the stems, and I build drum racks in Ableton, and draw automation if I have to, like to change samples or change kits or whatever. I mean, automate volumes or open up reverbs or whatever I'd have to do to like execute the song and think about um like what parts are going to be live kit, what parts are going to be hybrid, like what things are going to be pads. Like I come up with some kind of type of arrangement to come into rehearsal with and say this is a starting point. Obviously everything can change, but you know and that all pretty much has to be done ahead of time because the type of automation and stuff that I do, where like in the song it's like beat 2 is a snap and beat 4 is a clap, and I'm having the one pad switch between the two of them or something like that. I found it pretty hard to be able to do that kind of stuff in rehearsal because I have to like play like one beat over and over again and like make sure it's right and then copy it across the song. Or like if I'm automating something that has 5 samples on one pad, I have to do that in my studio. Like I can't have the whole crew like waiting on me while I do that. So I basically come in with like an Ableton session, and I put it on a hard drive and I import the drum rack track into the playback session. Um and obviously like we have a music director and a playback tech who deal with like, you know, tracks and other MIDI stuff and program changes and Finneas's MIDI world and stuff. So I'm basically only doing drums. So I put my stuff into the playback session, and you know, usually like obviously there already is a drum rack track, so I'm merging new songs with our existing stuff. And then we just get into rehearsal, and then I'm just editing. I'm, you know, running back and forth between drums and playback world,
Mm.
which is usually in another room, like, you know, editing automation, like changing levels, like whatever. Um so yeah, it's sort of like a team effort to like build a show like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When you first get a gig with a new artist, how do you learn the songs? So, you know, do you just learn by ear? Do you learn it by listening and then transcribe it? Or are you given a whole folder with all of the drum sheet music? Here you go, Andrew. Here's every single dot for you to read. And as a side note for that, so, you know, the Billie Eilish stuff, how did you go about figuring out what you were going to play for that? Because obviously it's very different, isn't it? You know, in terms of if you're used to just playing an acoustic kit, let's say, how did you approach learning that material?
Yeah, great question. My approach to learning stuff does vary depending on the artist. Obviously, like most of my work is with Billy and Finn, so um, you know, that like this answer would be tailored to them. But in general, you know, it sort of depends on like what the vibe is. Mm, Also, like most of the stuff I've done in the past 5 years has been like sort of like electronic pop. I was working with an artist called Verite from New York before Billy and Finn, and that was sort of a similar world in terms of MIDI and Ableton and tracks and SPD and all that stuff. So, and I had done some other stuff before that. So I had a background in this kind of thing. Starting to work with Billy was more electronic than I was used to. And things had to be closer to the record and more accurate. And I needed to, I had never really done extensive automation like that, where I'm really like trying to nail like the sounds from the record, but I also give it a live thing. So it was a lot of trial and error, coming in with drum parts that, you know, got vetoed, that didn't work. And also coming in with drum parts that I didn't think would work that did. And like we took something in a more live direction, you know. At this point, I kind of have a good handle on what they Billy and Finn like, and where I can push something with more live drum energy and where something really needs to just be samples. Um, but to answer your question, if you know, if I were in a situation, which I haven't been in that many, where there were no samples or tracks or anything, I get the songs, I write my own charts. Never really been given drum charts unless it was a musical theater thing, obviously, which I did do some of that in New York. So I'd get the songs, write the charts, um, and like play through the songs until I had them memorized. With an electronic pop thing, usually I get the stems and I'll load the stems. I'll build a playback session, group everything into like drums, vocals, bass, instruments, whatever. Um, and then I start depending on the song, like either I'll write the chart first or I'll just start pulling samples out and automating things, and then I'll write the chart. But both of those things happen. Um, if it's a completely new artist, I'm like building a rig. I'm like thinking about how many pads I need and if I need triggers or whatever. Obviously, with Billy, I have my setup. Um, so yeah, and then I just, you know, I have the setup. This is not it, but I would set up the rig for that artist, like, or you know, for Billy or for Phineas or whatever, in my studio and just start playing through the tunes. I have another screen back there, so I'm controlling Ableton from the drums, and I'm editing and changing, you know, automation and saying, oh, I don't need this sample. Oh, this is probably a trigger, you know, so just kind of like feeling my way through an arrangement. And once I feel like I'm good and I have like a pretty good arrangement with some variations, if the MD says, hey, play the sample here, play the live kick there, I can do that. Um, and then we go into rehearsal, and sometimes it stays the same and sometimes everything changes, you know? So That's the process. Yeah.
Now, I've got a couple of curveball questions for you to take us away from drums for a minute. So, what are your hobbies away from drums?
Good question. Yoga is a big one. Like I said, that's like sort of my other main interest. Um, and that's pretty much what I would say for that. Yoga basically is my other thing. I mean, like any normal person, I love like hanging out with friends and things and whatnot. But yeah, my other like interests, yoga and meditation, are like what I spend my free time like doing and learning about when I'm not playing.
Mm, cool. And people that have watched a few of these are going to get so sick of me saying this, but um, the reason I made that question is because for all of us, drums will have started as a hobby. When we were younger, we were like, "Yeah, drums," and we loved it. And it's we're just lucky, fortunate, worked hard, however we want to look at it, but we are lucky that it's our now our living, isn't it? But it doesn't mean that it still can't be our hobby. I still like uh, recording stuff for people and just yeah, drums just exciting, aren't they? So it can still be a hobby even though it's a job.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. Like, I feel like when I was like considering becoming a professional musician in high school and college, people would be like, "Oh, I never wanted to do that because then it would ruin something that was fun for me." Like, you know, now drumming is fun, and then if it becomes my job, it's not going to be fun anymore. And like, I wondered about like how that would come to be. And yeah, I mean, there sometimes it's not fun. Like there's work to be done, and like it's hard, or you're on a deadline, you got to learn a lot of songs quickly, or um whatever. Touring involves like jet lag and a lot of flights and things. There are things that are very job like about it. But I think something else we're living by is like that you play for free, you get paid to travel, you get paid to like learn songs, or you get paid to carry gear or whatever. Like, it's still fun. Like, it's still very much fun and very fulfilling, and more than fun, it's like rewarding in this deeply spiritual, like personal, like mental health type way. So like, yeah, I mean, it's a job, but like, I mean, music is like the passion, the life. It's just everything's about music. It's really amazing. It's all encompassing, and it's amazing, and it can drive you nuts sometimes, but you know
Yeah.
overall, it's even if I weren't getting paid to do it, I would still do it.
And that's it right there. There we are. That's
Yeah.
exactly it. Awesome. Now, on to the most important question of this interview. This is the one that everyone's been talking about.
Uh,
So, here we go.
let's do it.
What's your favorite cookie?
Ah, that might be the hardest question, man.
Are you into cookies?
Yeah, I dig a good cookie, like a soft baked chocolate chip. I'm kind of a classic dude. Um, okay, here's my favorite. Uh, I went to college in Chicago at Northwestern, and in the dining halls they had this thing called hot cookie bar, which was like they had like three different varieties. Usually it was like chocolate chip and some type of molten like triple chocolate thing and like something else. And it was like like so soft that it was probably like raw eggs. Like, I don't even know how it was like healthy to eat, or like even like safe to eat. But basically, there's these molten trays of cookie, like just cookie like batter, basically. So that was probably the most slamming cookie I've ever had.
You've got me like salivating here. Like that sounds because I love like just yeah cookie. If I'm making cookies with my little boy, me and
Mm.
him are so bad. We like mix up the cookie dough, and then my wife's like, right, let's put it in the oven, and we're like, no.
You've got By the time it goes in the oven, you have like three cookies worth of batter.
Exactly that. Yeah.
Feel you.
And the next part to that question is: are you a dunker? Would you take that chocolate chip cookie and go for the coffee or the tea or whatever it is?
No, I would say I'm pretty um unadulterated in my cookie taste. I guess if it was a really dry cookie, I might dunk it in milk, but that's about it.
Cool. With some people, I've gone on from this question, and I'll do this with you to talk about riders. Um, is there anything you can tell us about any riders? For any artists that you've played for that are have got interesting things on them.
Oh, that's a good question. I
Just
don't.
nothing that's going to get you in trouble.
Yeah, I can't honestly. Honestly, like if I had something, I would tell you, but I don't really remember there being anything that cool on any of the riders that I've seen. I mean, like it's usually like good and stuff, but pretty standard, like veggie trays and fruit and like whatever, almond butter, a loaf of bread. Like I've never worked with an artist that was like requesting like Hennessy or like socks or whatever. I mean, I guess actually, I should probably ask now that you asked me. I'm kind of curious. Like a lot of our crew have been on a bunch of arena tours. Like they've come from other like arena tours, like especially like the people that handle like backstage hospitality, all that stuff. So I'd be curious. I bet they have some stories, but at least in Billy camp and in Verite camp and like other camps I've been in, riders were generally pretty healthy and pretty normal, just fuel,
Mm,
because at the end of the day, like if you're requesting all kinds of like candy and like weird shit, like I don't know, you're gonna start to feel like bad on tour. It's like you gotta like keep the intake pretty cool.
yeah, yeah, cool. Oh, so no, I've heard stories of like palm trees in the dressing room, and stuff like that.
No, I haven't seen that. I mean, I don't actually know what's on Billy's ride. Knowing her, I'm sure it's very cool. She put people through this or that. Although I have heard some things about like, this like certain rider items were like just inside jokes between certain tour managers and local staff, like if we're going to like some venue, the TM or the PM knows like the head of hospitality there, they'll ask for some like silly thing. Oh, this is cool. Actually, I did hear about some band. I can't remember who it was, but they would request that they would request like just a meal of like whatever like the local specialty was. They'd be like, if we're in like this city and they're known for this, like just get us some of that, whatever it is. So that's like kind of a cool thing.
Back to serious question about drums again, and I've changed this one recently. If you could give one piece of advice to your younger self, so when you first started learning the drums, what would that advice be?
Um, wow, good question. I think I would have maybe tried to get my younger self to practice more or to like play other instruments more or something. Like these days, I kind of wish I had more keyboard skills and like more music theory knowledge. I mean, I have some, but like I'm like mostly drummer. So I feel like that would help in like production aspects. That's what I would tell like my younger self. My like 10 years ago self, I would say just lighten up. Like I think I have been such a perfectionist for so long, and I it has helped me in a lot of ways, obviously, like playing with Billy and Finneas, like that does demand perfection, like I work really, really hard to get things sounding good. And like I go like really deep with like electronics and parts and like fills and making sure that, this everything is correct. And that work ethic has helped me a lot. But at the same time, it's caused me a lot of like mental just like, oh, I'm not good enough, like this doesn't sound good, like whatever. And, at the end of the day, it's like if you're good and you care, like you're gonna do a good job. You don't have to go over the edge to this like insane level of like perfectionism and like mental hobgoblins or whatever. So, um, but it's cool. You know, life is the journey, and like, you know, it's always a work in progress, and I feel like I have a much better perspective than I did 5 years ago. You know, so
Mm.
um, that's all I would say on that.
So, Andrew, thank you so much for spending your time with us here at DrumWise today. It really has been an absolute pleasure talking with you.
My pleasure. Yeah, it's awesome. Thanks for having me, and I always love talking drums, so I appreciate it.